Okay, so what I'm about to ask you, if any of that applies to you, I want you to nod your head, okay? Have you ever been in a boring presentation? Have you ever been in a conversation where the other person just keeps going on and on and on? Have you ever felt that what you're trying to say is greatly misunderstood by the other person? Have you ever sensed that the opposite person seems to be lost in their own conversation and thoughts? And for the last one, I want you to answer very honestly. Have you been that person in the situations we mentioned before? Well, if you answered yes to the last question, then we have little areas of improvement when it comes to effective communication. And I have just the right guest with us today. Today, I'm in conversation with Matt Abrahams. Matt is a professor at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and his videos are watched more than 22 million times. He has given multiple TED Talks, he has co-founded his company, he's an author of a book, and his goal is to help as many people as possible to be effective communicators in their own domains and space. Now keep in mind, I have tried to probe Matt with difficult questions like, how do we communicate well when we are disagreeing with someone? Or how do we communicate when emotional stakes are high? And I'll tell you something, Matt has answered them brilliantly. Today we'll be learning about how to be an effective communicator and a conversationalist. Mr. Matt Abrahams, it's such an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for our conversation.
Absolutely. So if I got this right, you are a communications coach yourself. You have done TED Talks and you also have talks on the GSP website of Stanford with more than 22 million views. And even TED Talk, I think millions of people have appreciated that. And you also have co-founded your company, BoldEcho.
That's right. That's right. All of this is targeted. The teaching I do, the coaching, the talks are all targeted to help people feel more comfortable and confident in their communication.
Lovely, lovely. So if I just had to ask you more of a personal level, why do you think communication is so important?
Oh, wow. That's a huge question. So, it all boils down to relationships. I mean, the way that we relate to people in the world primarily is through communication, what we say, how we say it. So communication is critical to building trust, to collaborating, to accomplishing goals. And it's critical for us both in our professional lives and personal lives to make sure that we can communicate in a confident, clear way.
Excellent, excellent. I love the way you have put that in. So, Matt, just to start us off, I know one of the key areas that you're an expert at is how to be an effective communicator when we are talking, right? Mainly in business context or even personal context. So, if I have to ask you, can you simply explain what it means for a communication to be effective?
So, the bottom line is the other person understands what you're trying to say in terms of the message is clear. We call that fidelity. There's high fidelity, but also the emotional intent is clear as well. So effectiveness really means that you as a speaker accomplished your goal. And to my mind, a goal has three parts. It's information, emotion, and action. So when I'm communicating with you, I want to get some ideas and information across. I want to share my emotion. I want you to understand how I feel about it and how I'd like you to feel about it. And then often there's an action where I want you to do something about it. So it's really about what do I want you to know, feel, and do. And effective communication is communication that accomplishes that clearly and concisely.
Lovely. Excellent. I love the three ways you have broken that down. And so if I have to ask a counter question to it, so we know now that, okay, what makes a conversation effective? Probably now a counter to it would be what makes a conversation boring, like ineffective. So one is passing the message across, like, what we have, and then we want to make sure that my message passes across in a most proper way. but there are times when message passes across, but through twists and turns, and it makes the conversation boring. So what are some examples that you feel, or you might have come across yourself, where it makes a conversation extremely ineffective and boring?
So in my world, we like to talk about engagement. How do you make a message engaging so people are interested, feel part of it, or collaborating with you? And really, it boils down to something very simple. The conversation has to be relevant. It has to have meaning for the person you're speaking to, which means it's incumbent on us as the communicator to really think about, what does the audience need in this situation? So what does the person, my boss, my colleague, my friend, my partner, what do they need in this situation? So it means we have to do some reconnaissance and reflection and research so that we can tailor our message to be significant and relevant to them. And if you do so, it by definition should be engaging and not boring. So it all boils down to really understanding what the person needs in that moment.
Okay, and now one thing which you mentioned, what person needs in that moment, right? And that is something that I think we gauge while we are having a conversation, right? So I feel many people, when they are speaking, they go in this situation where they are not themselves aware of what thoughts they are keeping across to the opposite person. Okay, I'll give you an example. I feel my dad, my father, he is a great storyteller, but sometimes he deviates himself, not coming to the point. And majority of the times I have to tell him that, hey, let's get back on the point. So this has happened, and when he told me, is that what happens is, in his mind the thoughts are extremely clear, like he knows exactly what is happening in his mind, but when they are coming out, it somehow become mashed potatoes somewhere.
It's not just your father. I in my mind, I'm amazingly eloquent, and sometimes when I speak, I'm not as lucky. And it really boils down to two things. First and foremost, my mother. You're talking about your father. I'll talk about my mother. My mother has this saying. I know she did not create it, but she certainly says it a lot, and I really believe it's true. It's, tell me the time, don't build me the clock.
Oh, lovely.
Many people are clock builders. They say too much. They get into too much detail. They go into tangents. If you want to be engaging, if you want to be relevant, you have to be concise and clear. So the first thing is to really think about, how can I get my point across in the clearest way possible? But in order to do that, and where your father could benefit, and most people could, is to leverage structure. Structure gives you a beginning and an ending. It is a natural, logical flow of information. Think of it as a map or GPS. It helps you get from one place to the other in the most efficient way.
True.
So having a structure in mind can really help people like your father. Let me give you an example, if it's okay, of what a good structure is. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
My favorite structure in the entire world is very simple. It is the what, so what, now what structure. And here's how this works. When you're speaking, you talk about what it is you want to say. Next, you talk about why it is important and relevant to the person you're talking to. And then finally, you talk about what comes next. Maybe it's the next meeting, maybe it's a demonstration or a Q&A, but it's what, so what, now what. Most of the things that we communicate can be put into this structure. And by doing so, it makes it clear and relevant to your audience. So I encourage all of you, as you think about crafting your messages, to structure it that way. And I have to share, my answer to your question was in that structure. I told you what the structure is, why it was important, and I encouraged you to use it. So what, so what, now what is a great tool for helping your father and helping other people who have an idea of what they want to say, but it's how you package it to help your audience understand.
Brilliant. So I think now I feel this structure, or the tool that I would like to almost say secret sauce that you have given, it can easily be applied to probably any conversation that we have. Is that right?
Certainly. And in fact, you can even use this structure to initiate conversations. Many people come to me and say, I am so bad at small talk when I have to meet people I don't know. How do I do that? Use what, so what, now what. Go ask them a question. What brings you here? What's your favorite sports team? What do you think of the meal? So you ask what, and then when they answer, the next question is, so why is that important? So if somebody says my favorite sports team is the Golden State Warriors, that's my favorite team, then you say why? What connection do you have to the team? And then they answer, and then you can say, so are you watching the upcoming game? What do you think of their season? So by using what, so what, now what, not only does it help you package your messages, but it can actually help you have conversations.
I'm definitely going to be implementing this. So what, now what? That is a tool, that is a structure. Use this structure for any conversation that you initiate. Lovely. Now, another aspect I feel that for having an emetic, so communication probably consists of two things in my mind. One is the verbal, right? And another is body language. How, like, the gestures or whatever we do. I wanted to know your opinion. I know you have been an expert in this area. How much does body language play a role? To what extent does it play a role?
So there's some research that suggests that nonverbal communication, that's using your body and your voice, actually matters more than the words you say.
Wow.
I always argue you have to focus on what you say and how you say it with equal intensity and equal practice. But it is very important. Many of us fixate too much on what we're saying, and we don't spend any time practicing saying it or thinking about how it comes across. So we actually have to do both.
Excellent, excellent. So now, I think when we are communicating with someone, say I want to bring up a situation. We usually are in our offices and we do presentations, right? And during presentations, I have myself been in a situation, whereas I've seen other people be in this situation where there are two things that hinder their presentation. One is self-doubt. They feel that, oh, this is not right. They won't be able to pull it off. And other is, in its similar domain, confidence. And confidence is evident because it can be seen through body language, like we can see. So I wanted to understand and probably find out from you. Say someone is in a situation where they are having this lack of confidence and self-doubt. How can one overcome that when they are communicating?
Sure. And what you've just described is true for most people. In fact, research suggests 85% of people feel anxiety in high stakes communication situations.
Wow.
And quite frankly, I think the other 15% are lying.
Okay.
This is something that most of us experience. And to my mind, it's not about overcoming. I actually think there will always be situations that can make us nervous. And in fact, being a little nervous can be helpful to you. It gives you energy. It helps you focus. So to my mind, it's all about managing the anxiety. Use it to help you rather than to work against you. So we need to learn to manage our anxiety so it doesn't manage us. And I've spent a lot of my career, decades, looking at this, studying it, and working to help people. In fact, I've written a book on the subject. It all starts with taking a two-pronged approach. You have to manage the symptoms. That's what you feel and other people see. And the sources, the things that actually initiate the anxiety. So if you take a two-pronged approach and you work on it over time, you will feel more confident and come across as more confident. But it is certainly not a light switch. It's not like, oh, I do this one thing and I am an amazingly confident communicator. It takes time, but you can do it.
Okay, lovely. So as I like the two things that you said in there, that one is the source. Let's understand the source and probably acknowledge it, that it's okay that you're feeling that. And secondly, work on the symptoms. Can you elaborate more on the symptoms part? How can one work on their symptoms in general?
In fact, let me talk about both.
Okay.
So let's go with sources. There are lots of reasons people feel nervous. I'll give you two examples.
Yeah.
One is being judged. You are being judged and evaluated, and that can make us very nervous. So what do you do about it? Well, one of the best things to do, many people have done in other avenues of their lives. They've done something called visualization. If you are an athlete or a musician, you have had a coach or a teacher who has said, see yourself doing this event prior to actually doing it. And there's research that says performance is enhanced and anxiety is reduced.
Wow.
The same thing is true with public speaking. If you visualize yourself, see yourself being successful in it, you actually can feel more confident and comfortable. In fact, Research into this started in the late 1980s, and it's one of the longest studied techniques. And the cool thing, and I know you're a high-tech guy, you don't just have to do it in your mind's eye. There are actually apps that can help you. There's a virtual reality tool. You get goggles, you load the app on your phone, you put the goggles on, and you can see an audience, and you can practice in front of that audience. So in both cases, you mentally visualizing, you're using the app. What you're doing is you're desensitizing yourself. And by desensitizing yourself, you will feel less nervous and worried when you're being evaluated. The example I always use, my older son just got his driver's license.
Okay.
We were out on the road practicing for hours. Why? So that when the instructor got in the car to evaluate him, he had done it before. So he was less nervous. And the same thing is true. So a source of anxiety is being evaluated. Another source is being nervous about the future. Many of us get nervous because we're afraid of what might happen. I'm afraid that I might not get the funding. I'm afraid my students at Stanford are afraid they're not going to get a good grade. The entrepreneurs I coach are afraid they're not going to get support. All of those are future-oriented goals that make you nervous. And the best way to short circuit that is to become present-oriented. By definition, if I'm in the moment, I'm not worried about the future. And at some point, we can talk about ways to get present-oriented. So those are sources of anxiety. Symptoms are things like getting nervous and shaking, having perspiration on your brow, talking too fast. All of these are things we can learn to manage. So for example, if you talk too fast, taking a deep breath and gesturing slowly will slow down your speaking rate. If you perspire and blush, like many people do, you need to reduce your core body temperature. Holding something cold in the palm of your hand will actually cool you down. You will sweat less and blush less. So I know I spoke for a long time. Sorry, I am a professor. I like to lecture a little bit, but there are things you can do to manage both symptoms and sources that'll help you feel better.
No, this is extremely valuable. I mean, this information, I would want to listen to you more. But I would say that if I have to extract some key element from that, what you just told is, it is important to manage both of them, right? It is important to practice, keep doing it again and again till that fear goes out, and somewhere fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah, and in fact, there is something to that fake it till you make it. And it's actually a really simple equation. If I act confident, you will treat me confidently, and I will then begin to feel more confident. So if I know that when I get nervous, I pace around a lot or I move my head a lot, I can work and practice to do less pacing, to move my head less. And when you see me moving my head less, you'll say, wow, he's pretty confident. And based on your response to me, I'll feel better. So that's where practice comes in. That's where digitally recording yourself and watching to see what it's like, that's incredibly painful. But when you see what others see, it helps you become comfortable at presenting.
Beautiful, beautiful. Very well said. And I think everyone should do it. Like, they have their cameras, they have their phones, just start recording and start doing it. Lovely, Matt. So now, one area that we talk about is, of course, communicating, having conversations, talking our points across, right? I feel there is another important element which I can definitely improve on, and that is handling disagreements, right? So many a times you're with your colleagues or partners, whoever, your best friend, and there are disagreements that you come across every day.
I mean, not everybody agrees with you all the time? What's wrong? I'm joking. Of course, a very common problem. Very common.
Yeah. So I think what I want to learn from you and understand is that how can one navigate disagreements more gracefully when we are communicating?
Well, I could say a lot about this. And in fact, I have a podcast. I do a podcast for Stanford's Business School called Think Fast, Talk Smart. And I just interviewed a professor who's an expert in conflict resolution.
Okay.
And there's a lot to be said about this. Let me make it as direct as I can.
Yeah.
In a conflict where there's disagreement, the goal is to problem solve and negotiate rather than to prove yourself right versus the other person being right. And many of us go into conflict wanting us to be right. Hey, if you saw the world the way I did, you would totally agree with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to maladaptive behavior. That leads to making the argument, making the conflict worse. Rather, your challenge is to try to invite the other person to negotiate and problem solve with you. And if you have that as your approach, it will change the interaction. It makes it more collaborative. It tones down some of the venom or anger or negative emotion, and it brings you together. And what it requires first and foremost is that you listen. In order to negotiate, in order to problem solve, you have to understand the other person's perspective. So my advice is this: change your approach. It's not about being right. It's about problem solving. Second, listen to understand the other person's point of view. It doesn't mean you agree. It just means you understand. And then from there, invite the other person to negotiate, to problem solve. So together, you've come up with a resolution that works for you and works for them.
Brilliant. Can I probe a little bit more on what you just said?
Bring it.
So I know you mentioned. So this is, I think, first and foremost, we need to focus on the problem, then the person. I think that needs to be out of the way, and I truly agree with that. One thing which I really wanted to get a little bit more deeper is that when disagreements happen, and majority of the times, emotion kicks in, right? And emotional stakes are high. Either people are in somewhat angry or emotional, sensitive to things that other person is saying, right? So how can one be graceful and even maintain that composure when communicating and making sure our point is put across effectively in that emotional state? What would you say?
So emotion is really hard and tricky in these situations because emotion is important, and emotion and how you feel is definitely important. So I would never say don't have those emotions.
Okay, don't ignore emotion.
To use them, we just have to use them constructively. So first and foremost, if this is something that is very upsetting to you, try to take the time to manage that emotion before you bring it to the conversation. So that might be talking to other friends, going for a walk, finding a punching bag, whatever it takes, but to give yourself some time to experience the emotion, but gets a little distance from it. Now, that doesn't mean when you're actually in the conversation and trying to collaborate to find a solution to this, that you don't share, hey, this is very upsetting to me. But when we express emotion, we want to make sure we express emotion from our perspective. True. We use I language. I am very upset by this versus you language, which is accusatory. Because if you think about it, if the whole goal is to invite somebody to collaborate and problem solve, you don't want them defensive. True. So you need to take the time to manage your anxiety, your emotion, and then bring a much more managed emotion to the conversation. It's hard. I wish it's easy to say, it's hard to do. But sometimes taking a little time, sometimes invoking support of somebody else can be really helpful.
Wonderful. And I like how both your answers somehow connected that. First of all, be aware of what you're going to say. When I asked you previously of the conflict resolution, focus on the problem, and somehow if you are at an emotional state, distance yourself and then come back and again focus on the problem. Use I versus using the you language. Excellent. Very, very well said, Matt. Now, I also wanted to talk about your book that you have written, and I also wanted to talk about the company that you have. So can you tell us something about your book, Speaking Up Without Freaking Out, and also what is your company about?
Yeah. So the book was written over a decade ago. It's now in its third edition. And ultimately, the book is about helping people feel more comfortable and confident when they communicate. It's called Speaking Up Without Freaking Out.
Yeah.
And it provides over 50 techniques from academic research to help people feel more comfortable and confident and to be more clear and concise when they communicate. Not every technique is for every person. Everybody is different, but it is my hope that people can extract 3 to 5 techniques that'll work for them. It's a pocket book. It's not very thick. The idea is that you could read it in an afternoon, a couple days before you have a big presentation or a big meeting and get value from it.
Okay.
And the company, BoldEcho, I co-founded with a business partner, and she and I Both come from an academic background, but both also have a business background. And we help companies all over the world, big and small, individuals from senior leadership all the way to individual contributors, again, feel more comfortable and confident and be more clear and concise in their communication. And we named the company very aptly. We want people's messages to be bold, and we want them to echo long after they've left the room or the call. So both of those are avenues that people can pursue to build their communication skills.
Lovely. That's a very bold name also. BoldEcho. And we'll also list down the book and the company in the video description so that people can easily refer to it. Now, more of a personal question here. Is there any communicator or a personality or a leader that you look up to when it comes to effective communication?
There are so many that I really respect, but I want to share one with you because I think her message is phenomenal, and I just was so moved by her. Her name is Brittany Packnett. She has a TED Talk. Yes, she has a TED Talk on confidence. And as we've already discussed, confidence is something that's very important to me.
Yeah.
And I am so amazed, not only that she delivers her message very confidently, but she does so using wonderful communication tools of storytelling, weaving in important information, delivering it in a very authentic and passionate way. I encourage anybody listening to this to check out Brittany Packnett's talk. I really, really see her as somebody who's doing a great job demonstrating many of the techniques that I teach and I coach.
Wow, lovely. We'll definitely put the TED Talk video of Brittany too for more and more viewers to check it out. So, Matt, now coming to the last segment of the show. This show is called It's Not That Complicated. And the whole idea is that we take such complex, broad topics out there and make it simple for people to understand and our viewers to understand, right? So to wrap up, if I have to ask you, what are some 3 CTAs, some 3 call to actions that you would recommend that people can start doing today to be more of an effective leader and a conversationalist? What would you say?
First and foremost, before you have any communication, really think about what does your audience need. Be in service of your audience. Too often we start by saying, here is what I want to say. Rather, it's what does my audience need to hear? That's the first thing. Second, once you understand your audience, you have to think about what is it I'm trying to get across? What's my goal? And we talked about that earlier. What do I want them to know? How do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? And then third, getting back to your father's situation, invoke structure. Think about a structure that you can use to help get your information across. There are many, many structures. As I shared, my favorite is what, so what, now what. But if you start today with the emails you write, the conversations you have with your family, your kids, your partner, your business associates, if you think about their needs, who they are, the audience, what is your goal specific for this interaction? And then how do I structure my information? Your communication will be clearer, it will be more concise, and people will see you as more confident.
Brilliant, brilliant. Those are some wonderful CTAs that I think anyone can implement today. Matt, again, it was such an honor talking to you today, and it was such an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I loved our chat, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Okay, so what I'm about to ask you, if that applies to you, I want you to nod your head, okay? Have you subscribed to the channel yet? Well, if you nodded yes, then thank you, you're awesome. And if you haven't, well, you can just do that right now. Right here, subscribe.